This is Joe Painter on the People Chronicles with another edition of What's the Story? And there's so many stories to learn about. You'll see and hear many right here on thepeoplechronicles.com. And we get to wondering, actually, a friend said to me, what do you know about brain injuries? And I thought, well, I don't know. Football players and concussions, that's kind of been in the news. But I had to be honest, I didn't know a whole lot. And then she introduced me to Angie Ficco. It's very nice to see you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me today.
And I want you to know, Angie is not here to just, be the spokesperson for brain injuries. You have suffered a very serious brain injury. You wouldn't know it looking at you.
Right. That's been the biggest challenge with the brain injury, is because it's invisible. So that's what makes it very difficult. People don't recognize the difficulties that I'm having.
What happened? What was your brain injury?
Well, I had a swingset beam collapse on top of me and had been taken to the hospital, the emergency department, and I got 8 staples to close the laceration on my head. And I went home with the good news that my CT was negative. There was no cracked skull or bleeding of the brain. And I stayed home for about 2 weeks from work. And then I followed up with a family doctor to remove the staples and asked if I felt okay, and I said, yeah, I feel great. And then I went back to work. After I returned to work is when the brain injury really started to reveal itself.
How did it do that?
Well, at the time, I was a community liaison, so that meant I had to travel around counties, visit multiple providers, and talk about services that were available to them. I had quite a large territory, spanned over 8 counties, over 700 accounts. And I started not knowing where I was during the day. I started showing up for appointments I was already at. I started taking lunches to places I was at the week before. I forgot to get my daughter off the bus. I mean, a lot of things started happening. My personality totally changed, became argumentative, impulsive. I went out and bought a car one day, without even thinking about it or asking my husband. Just a complete personality change, and it was terrifying because I didn't know what was going on, and people around me were confused.
Did you know you were changing, or did people around you notice it and tell you?
You know what? Not at first. When I kind of realized it was probably about 3 weeks into the job, is when I found out that my reports were wrong from my boss, and then I found out my expenses are wrong, and then I started looking back on my day timer and realized there were appointments I missed. And then about that time is when I started going to appointments I'd just been to over those 3 weeks, or maybe the day before. So for 3 weeks, I probably didn't know. I think I was just busy and trying to get back into the swing of things. But then I started picking up on little things. And then I was like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with me. Why is this happening?
Were there memory lapses? I mean, if you were going to the same place over again, there's a memory lapse.
Didn't remember. I actually don't remember the entire week prior to my accident. I have no idea what I did that week. Since the accident, I have had memory issues. I couldn't remember who my daughter's godparents were.
Oh, my.
It's my brother and my sister.
So an amnesia sort of...
Yeah, I don't have it severe. It's just, it's every once in a while. You know, friends will be like, oh, it's our song. And I'll be like, I never heard this before. And they're like, what are you talking about? This has been our song for 20 years, So it's not all the time, but it's rare. I mean, not rare, but it's weird how it pops up.
So how long ago did the Swingset collapse?
It was about 3.5 years ago. No, 3 years and a month ago.
And 3 years and a month ago, you go for a head laceration, they close it up, and you're good to go, is what everybody thinks.
Absolutely.
The doctors, you, your family, your husband, and you go back to work. When all of these things happened that you're experiencing and that you described, did you relate it to the swing set collapsing, or were you just thinking, what's going on?
Absolutely. I never did. I never did. I just was frightened. I thought I was losing my mind. I was scared. I just didn't know where to turn, to be honest with you. And I just felt like my world was crumbling around me.
Where did you turn?
Well, what happened is I kind of had a meltdown at work, and I had a very good employer who said, you need to take some time off. And I went back to the doctor, who said, I just don't know what's wrong. I'm going to send you to a neurologist. But I couldn't get in for 2.5 months.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so that I waited for that, and then I got there, and that didn't get me very far because he wasn't able to help me either. So then he sent me to a neuropsychologist, which I had never heard before. Neurologists mainly deal with like surgery and the structure of the brain, stuff like that. A neuropsychologist is a blend of neurology and psychology. And what they do is they administer tests, cognitive tests, that test your fatigue, your memory, your recall. I mean, it's an 8-hour grueling test. So I got referred there and had that done. And when the test results came back, it was very apparent that I had had a brain injury.
So that's when, some 3 months later, they related your symptoms to the accident.
Yeah, about 3 to 4 months later, yeah.
Okay, so now we've identified it. And
Right.
as I'm listening to you, Angie,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of all the times I was hit over the head.
Yeah,
or,
absolutely.
you know, it's just living. You can bang your head, knock your head, or have an accident, fall off a bicycle, whatever the
Right,
case may
absolutely.
be. So now they've identified it. What's the treatment?
Well, the treatment was, a lot of it is cognitive remediation. And what that is, for if you haven't heard of that before, it's basically learning how to take what you're going through and coming up with strategies to compensate and deal with it. A good example would be, I was highly organized before the accident. I still struggle with that. So one of the strategies I have learned is to be very prepared. And I mean, that sounds easy and people think, okay, I do that too. But no, for me, it's a lot of steps to become prepared. So before I go out on a work day, for instance, I will spend the day before planning where I'm going to go, calling the places I'm going, making sure who I need to see is there, entering it in my GPS because I cannot reroute on my own. And then making sure I have my supplies with me that I'm going to need, any presentation stuff. It takes me a lot longer than the general person. I mean, before I would do that, and it was kind of like a habit. Oh, I'm going here today, throw everything in the car. I've got my daytimer, I've got my lunch, I already booked it. What used to take me probably maybe an hour tops takes me probably a full day now.
What happens if a curveball's thrown into your day?
That's a real problem. That's something.
She's smiling about it.
Well, that's something that's still a struggle. I have triggers, things like stress. If plans change and I'm not prepared, I get very frazzled. And that's when I can either be look kind of like I'm unorganized, or I can get very irritable and snappy. And basically, it's because I'm overwhelmed. So and those connections are no longer there for me to be able to say, okay, now this was happening, but now we need to change the plan. You need to kind of recalculate, is what I like to call it.
Right.
And I have real difficulty with that recalculating. I just can't do it right now.
What I'm hearing is there's not a fix. In other words, if there's a brain injury such as this, it necessarily can't be repaired, but you just deal differently with it. You function differently to work around it. Is that the case?
Well, there are some science. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but there's some science about neuroplasticity and how you can rebuild things, and it can kind of make things stronger. But in my experience in the 3 years, and from a lot of people I've spoke with, it's gotten slightly better, but it's really how we're dealing with it.
So
and
you will just live with this.
Yeah.
How good is the medical community at identifying it when you talk about an injury that's healed and now this is happening and it maybe not instantly related? Are doctors educated or insightful about that naturally?
From my experience, no. And I'm not just speaking from physicians that I saw. I have spoke to many physicians. I've gone to a lot of brain injury seminars and workshops. I've even snuck into some clinical ones, just to have the conversation and ask them. Because for me, really, when I trace back what happened, where my problems began is, A, I left the hospital with no information, like not even a pamphlet for what to watch for.
Right.
And then B, the physician not knowing what to look for to release me back to work. I mean, they have very concrete plans for getting kids back to school. And there is a program called Return to Work, but nobody knows about it.
Oh.
And it's not being utilized, so.
Are you letting people know about it?
Absolutely.
Are people who've suffered an injury or maybe experiencing symptoms like yours and confused because they don't know why, are they reaching out to you?
I've had many people reach out to me, at least 50, and they've been everything from sports injuries as simple as, maybe doing housework, falling down the stairs, tragic accidents. The stories are all over the place. But really, even if it's a very severe accident, after they've healed physically, we all have that same issue going on.
So you will deal this, and looking at you, you would never know.
Right.
You couldn't tell, you're not walking
right.
in a different manner.
Right.
There's no physical
right.
observation.
Right.
So do you find yourself still explaining to people, well, this is happening because I had a brain injury?
In the beginning, one thing I really struggled with was trying to get people to understand because it was invisible. And it's not that I don't explain anymore, I just don't get as upset anymore because it's not their fault that they don't understand. And I certainly don't want them to have one to understand.
Right.
But unless you've had one, it's very difficult to explain. The symptoms are just all over the place, and one day can be different than the next. So, I try to do the best I can at educating people, but I certainly don't go around explaining myself all the time. I kind of laugh about it sometimes because you just have to have you just have to be able to get through it. You really do.
Are there any particular places or numbers or resources that you could offer to anybody who's watching this right now who might think, hey, maybe that's going on with me?
Sure, absolutely. One of the best resources out there is called brainline.org, BRAINLINE.org. Fantastic site for either people who think they have a family member or themselves, they're a caretaker, whatever. Great site. Another one is the Brain Injury Association of Pennsylvania. It's BIAPA.org. And then they're also part of the Brain Injury Association USA. So that's BIAUSA.org. And on all those sites, they have resource lines. They have people you can call and talk to, and they can help you get the resources you need. And there's even state programs and federal programs to assist people.
And you have been an incredible resource right now here on the People Chronicles, simply sharing your story and providing hope and maybe some understanding to other people who might be going through it. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Our very best to you, and you're a walking woman of hope.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
that, Angie. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
At Queen City Family Restaurant on Lancaster Avenue in Reading, we cook delicious meals 24/7. Breakfast is available anytime. We have a 25-plus item salad bar, extraordinarily tasteful daily soups, fresh made-to-order lunch and dinner entrees. Whatever you're in the mood for, our friendly staff is here to serve you in our newly renovated atmosphere.